down at the flow of people rushing back and forth below. It looks exactly like a colony of ants, struggling to carry food back to the nest before a storm. But the tragedy lies in the fact that this storm never ends, and the nest is always leaking. Why does the one who stands still die faster than the one who runs headfirst into a wall? Why has the contentment of a modest life, once praised as the virtue of sages, now become a death sentence for the wallets of those naive enough to believe in stability? This world operates on a brutal paradox. Stability is the deadliest trap, where the ground beneath one's feet never stands still, but always slides backward like a giant conveyor belt. Anyone who dares to stop to breathe is immediately discarded. The essence of this game does not lie in how much one accumulates, but in how fast the flow of material circulates. Look at the banknote in your wallet. It lies there still, gentle, and seemingly harmless. But in reality, it is gasping its last breaths before its value evaporates into a vacuum. People still whisper to each other about the virtue of frugality, about picking up every spare cent to save for a peaceful future. Yet they forget that the rules of the game changed long ago. From the day currency was no longer backed by solid gold, but only by the fragile faith of the masses in the promises of financial institutions, the game became different. When faith is the only thing anchoring value, devaluation is inevitable, because faith is easily shaken while the greed of the money-printing machine is bottomless. Saving, in its rawest view, is actually an act of withdrawing from the game. It is a naive effort to freeze time and labor into a fixed number, hoping that 10 years later, that number will still buy the same bowl of fio as it does today. But human society, or rather this giant economic engine, hates those who withdraw. It needs fuel, it needs spending, and it needs the cash flow to roar like a waterfall to lubricate the gears of power. Therefore, it creates an invisible monster called inflation to punish those bold enough to lock their money in a safe. Inflation is not a random accident of the economy, nor is it the mistake of a few flawed policies. It is a leather whip striking directly at the backs of the donkeys who want to stop and rest, forcing them to keep pulling the plow, keep working, and keep creating new value just to compensate for the old value that has been silently stripped away. Look at the haggard faces in the banks. The elderly are trembling as they hold savings passbooks they spent a lifetime of deprivation to build. Their eyes go hollow when they realize the meager interest is not enough to buy a pack of imported medicine, while the principal has shriveled pathetically compared to the price of land, gold, and rice out there. That is when the truth emerges most clearly and cruelly. Their virtue of frugality has been betrayed, and their sacrifice has become prey for inflation to tear apart. They did nothing wrong. They only committed a single crime, which was believing that safety could be bought by doing nothing. While the truth of this era is that one must run at full tilt just to stay in the same position. The trap lies in the fact that the system always encourages people to work hard, yet silently guts the fruits of that hard work through the mechanism of price escalation. This turns wages into a block of ice held in the hand. The tighter you grip it, the faster it melts. The longer you hold it, the more freezing the pain. A wage earner who heads out in the morning and returns in the evening receiving a fixed sum at the end of the month and joyfully depositing it into an account is actually participating in a race where the finish line is constantly moved further away. This year the goal is to buy a house, but next year the house price has doubled. The saved money suddenly becomes a joke, a pile of meaningless scrap paper before the madness of the market. That feeling of helplessness does not come from laziness, but from the punishment reserved for those who refuse to turn themselves into debtors or speculators. Modern society does not need frugal sages. It needs consumption addicts, moths rushing into investment gambling dens, and those ready to borrow from the future to pay for the present. Therefore, inflation is maintained as an invisible tax on fear and caution. Whoever fears risk and whoever wants safety must pay the price by having their assets eroded every day. Conversely, the reckless who borrow, using other people's money to do business or speculate, benefit as the real value of their debt decreases over time. It is a ridiculous irony where the borrower grows rich thanks to the devaluation of money, while the lender, through savings deposits, grows poor because of that very same devaluation. Looking deeper into this mechanism, One sees an exploitation so sophisticated that the victims do not even know their pockets are being picked. They only see prices climbing and blame themselves for not being good enough at making money. Few dare to look straight at the truth that their money is being diluted to serve the banquets of the elite. The strings of interest pull the consumer puppets, whispering in their ears to buy, to upgrade, and to invest. They are told not to let their money die, but in reality, the system is herding them into riskier gambles, where the chance of losing everything is higher than being eroded by inflation. Caught in a dilemma, people must choose to hold money and die a slow death, or invest and risk a sudden demise. This is the tragic plight of the middle class, those who have a little to spare but are not rich enough to manipulate the game, yet not poor enough to have nothing left to lose. Inflation is the perpetual motion engine of capitalism. It ensures that no one can rest on their laurels, that a billionaire can end up empty-handed if they stop moving, and a beggar can change their life if they know how to surf the waves of speculation. It blurs the line between real and phantom value, turning everything into a commodity, from land and housing to faith and health. When a bowl of porro doubles in price after a few years, it is not because the porro is twice as delicious, but because the money used to buy it has been cheapened by half. To buy that bowl of pho, a person must run twice as fast, work twice as hard, and sell their labor twice as cheaply. It is a spiral with no end, where humans are turned into hamsters running in a wheel. The faster they run, the faster the wheel spins, and just stopping for 1 second to breathe will result in being flung out and crushed by the wheels of history. The cruelty of inflation lies in the fact that it strips away the human right to rest. It turns old age into a terrifying obsession instead of a time for enjoyment. It forces those who have contributed their whole lives to continue worrying about food and money until the very moment they close their eyes for good. There is no concept of enough in the dictionary of this era, because today's enough will be tomorrow's deficiency, and satisfaction with the present is the poison that kills the future. Those who hold real assets, those who own land, factories, and technology, look at inflation as a wind beneath a kite's wings. Their assets skyrocket in value without them having to do much. Meanwhile, those who hold cash, the wage earners, look at inflation as a storm sweeping away the roof over their heads. The gap between rich and poor does not widen because the rich work harder than the poor, but because the rich know how to ride the wave of inflation, while the poor try to swim against the flood with their weak physical strength. The law of survival here is not to save, but to convert. One must quickly convert sweat and tears into forms of assets that cannot be printed more of. One must turn oneself into a holder of the means of production instead of just a holder of bank promissory notes. But to do that requires wisdom, daring, and even ruthlessness, things that schools and old moral lessons never teach. People still teach children to be obedient, to be thrifty, and to put money in piggy banks, unintentionally training a new generation of victims for this meat grinder. These children grow up with the naive belief that hard work will be rewarded, only to be disillusioned when they realize that hard work is merely a necessary condition to exist. To survive and prosper, one must know how to play with numbers, how to turn debt into leverage, and how to turn inflation into a companion. The price of naivety is too high, but no one cries for the naive. Society only honors the winners, regardless of whether that victory was built on wisdom or deception. Looking at the urban areas springing up like mushrooms and the skyscrapers glittering with lights, do not be quick to admire that artificial prosperity. See instead those millions of tons of reinforced concrete built from the evaporated savings of millions of people, from the borrowing of a whole generation's future. Inflation is the fuel that burns peace in exchange for growth. It is a massive transfer of wealth from the pockets of the many to the pockets of the few. A legal robbery protected by complex macroeconomic theories that ordinary people can never understand. Finally, when night falls and the crowds thin out, leaving only the pale yellow streetlights shining on lives exhausted by an unequal race, one truly feels the coldness of the law of money. There is no room for weakness, no room for stopping, and certainly no room for blind frugality. To survive, one must learn to become part of the flow, must accept that stability is an illusion, and that chaotic change is the only constant. Do not blame inflation for being cruel, as it is merely a natural phenomenon of human greed being systematized. Blame yourself for believing too much in the fables of the ant and the grasshopper, while in reality, it is the ant that dies withered in the nest, because its food store was eaten hollow by termites, while the grasshopper had already managed to fly to a different, more prosperous forest. The sentence has been pronounced. There is no judge, no jury, only the electronic tickers dancing with cold red and green numbers. He who understands the rules lives, and he who resists is crushed. It is simple, neat, and cold, just like the nature of this universe itself. Discard the mindset of a medieval farmer trying to stockpile grains for the winter. Put on the mindset of a hunter in the financial jungle, where today's prey can become tomorrow's hunter, and the price of standing still is becoming someone else's dinner. Money never sleeps, and neither does inflation. It is gnawing away at every moment of humanity's peace, reminding us that in this era, frugality is no longer a virtue, but a gentle, sweet, and tragic suicide.